through some screenshots of the actual application portal, our Smart Simple system, and the questions that you're required to answer to apply for this specific program. I'll ask that during those two sections, if you can please hold your questions. In fact, I think what would be most efficient if folks have questions, if you can just enter them into the chat throughout the conversation. Once we get to that question and answer section, I'll move through as many of those questions that have been submitted in the chat as possible. And then if we aren't able to get to your question today, there'll be opportunities for you all to reach out directly with anything we're not unable to answer. So that's the plan for today. All right, and let us get started here. So this program, our Grants for Artists program, is for independent artists in the state of Maryland. The grant award is $2,500. This program is designed to provide holistic support that is not product or project based, and funds can support working or living expenses. I should also mention that this grant program is one of the State Arts Council's most popular programs, which is wonderful, and we're so happy to see so many independent artists applying. But of course, it also means that it's fairly competitive. Historically, we've been able to fund about 15 to 20% of our applications annually, just to give you a sense of the numbers that we're working with. For this specific cycle of the program, the applications are now, of course, open online. We have our info session today that will, again, be posted on our website for you to reference later, or for folks who weren't able to join us today. The deadline this year is January 17th. And to review a couple main points about the program, it is eligibility-based review. That means there's no critical review of work samples or submissions that you're going to be providing. The grantees for this program are chosen at random based on those that pass the eligibility screening. And one requirement, if you do receive a grant, the funds must be used or obligated by the end of our fiscal year 2025, which is June 30th. One thing I should mention, and I'll get into a little bit about the review process later, that eligibility review is conducted internally with a team of MSAC staff members. Last year we had about 1,800 applications, and it took us about 3 weeks to get through them. So that's about the time that we plan to take this year during our eligibility review. And as I mentioned, the grantee selection is randomized. So based on the eligibility review, those applications are then entered into a random draw to be selected for funding. A little bit about those eligibility requirements. Artists must provide evidence of a sustained creative practice. You must be 18 years or older and living in Maryland, and we ask that you either are renting or own property at the time of the application. And you must be creating work unaffiliated with an organization, institution, or entity. And the funding that you're applying for this grant must be used for work created outside of those relationships. Applicants must not be enrolled in a matriculated high school, undergraduate, or graduate degree seeking program. You can be taking classes like on the side or non-credit seeking classes, but not enrolled in a degree seeking program. And then we're also unable to fund folks who have received grants for artists in the most previous cycle in 2024. So we ask that those folks hold off until reapplying until 2026. And here is just an overview of the types of funds that Grants for Artists can be used for. The Grants for Artists Award can be used for. As I mentioned, these are living and working expenses. It's a pretty comprehensive list of materials you may need for your creative practice, to sustain your creative practice, as well as just daily living and well-being expenses. So again, these are not tied to a specific project outcome. You can include project expenses related to, your most recent body of work or things that you're working on. but again, they're not specifically tied to one specific output. Here's a kind of succinct list of some things that the funds may not be used for. Again, those include activities that are performed as part of regular continuing employment with an entity. So that being a nonprofit, an LLC, an institution, or a government agency. Capital improvements or purchases of permanent equipment, and the acquisition of capital assets. Additionally, the funds may not be used for, and this applies to most of our grant programs, contributions to a person who holds or candidates for elected office, political parties, organizations, or action committees, any political campaign or referendum, lobbying activities, expenses for which the applicant has been awarded funds through other MSAC grant programs. So funds received through Grants for Artists program may not be spent on projects that are supported by funds from MSAC grant programs other than Grants for Artists. So no double dipping, in other words. A couple of other requirements of this program. So we do require that the applications are submitted through our Smart Simple grant portal. You will also be asked to submit a W-9 with your current address. And if you are awarded a grant, you will be asked to submit a final report at the end of the funding period. The report is super simple. What we really are interested in learning is how you ended up using the funds, and some anecdotes about the impact of the funding on your artist's production, your life. We want to know the impact of the Grants for Artists program. As I mentioned, this is the process of which grants are selected or awarded. We do our eligibility review internally. Again, the main criteria are those general eligibility items I mentioned, your residency, age, educational status. And then we also want to make sure that we're collecting information that demonstrates that you are a practicing artist with a sustained practice. So I'll walk you through what we're asking for there in the application in a moment. And then we also want to make sure that you're planning to, if awarded, you're planning to spend the grant in a way that aligns with those eligible expenses we just talked about. Again, with the selection process, all eligible applications are entered into a randomized selection process. And then from there, once those grantees have been selected, all applicants will be notified via Smart Simple, and grantees will receive an agreement form and payment. One thing to notice about this program is there's kind of three categories for notification. One will be if your application was deemed ineligible, and we'll let you know some general reasons why it may have been deemed ineligible, and also invite you to contact us if you want some additional information. The second category would be that you were declined, which means that you were eligible, but simply your application did not get selected during that random process. And then the third category, of course, would be that your application was selected and will be funded. Because of the selection process for this program, if your application was declined, meaning you were eligible but just weren't selected for funding, we don't really have any valuable feedback for you on how to improve your application, again, because it's random. So just keep that in mind. With many of our other grant programs, we really encourage applicants to get in touch with us for feedback. But for this one, we don't really have anything helpful or critical to share with you if you were actually eligible for the funding. So I realize that's frustrating, but just the nature of kind of the randomized selection process. So we'll take a couple minutes to walk through the application from start to finish. These are screenshots from our Smart Simple program. There are links to Smart Simple in the guidelines and on the website for Grants for Artists. If you don't already have a login, you just simply have to create an account. It's a pretty straightforward program. Of course, if anyone has trouble accessing their account, you can feel free to reach out to us. We can either resend your password. You also have the opportunity to reset your password upon login as well. So the application has these kind of main components you'll see at the bar on the top of the screen. This first slide shows kind of where you're just entering your general contact information. Some of this will be pulled directly from your account in Smart Simple, and then we'll ask you, to enter your social security number, tell us which county you're residing in. And then this general eligibility really walks us through a checklist of those main criteria. Ask if you're a resident. We're going to ask about your educational status. We're going to ask if your funding is, if the grant will support activities that are being completed in affiliation with another entity. And then we're also going to ask if you received a grant last year. And so depending upon your response to these answers, you'll be allowed to proceed with the next phase of the application. Again, based on the eligibility criteria. The next page is the artist details. This is where we want you to tell us a little bit more about your artistic practice. We list key genres that this program supports. And then you also have the opportunity, if you feel that the work that you're creating does not fit in any of these categories, to tell us a little bit about your artistic practice in this other section. Of course, if you're creating across many disciplines, which we know these days most artists are, feel free to check all the boxes that apply there, specifically to this grant and how you plan to use the funding. As you scroll back down, this is where we'll ask you kind of to submit that evidence of your artistic practice. Again, what you submit here will not be evaluated critically. It solely will be to demonstrate that you have a sustained creative practice. So you'll see here that you have the option of submitting a link to a website or a social media page. I want to highlight, we don't want to just have your handle, like your Instagram handle, for example, if that's a great demonstration of your work. We want the actual link. It'll really help us in the review process. And just double check that those are the right links, that they're working. That's very important. You're also able to upload a resume or work sample. Something that I'll mention here is that just including one photo of one piece of work might make it a little difficult for us to evaluate that aspect of kind of sustained or continued work. You are welcome to use both of these options. You can share a website and a social media and upload a resume and or work samples. That may be kind of like the most comprehensive way to approach it. Or, if you are uploading like one PDF, maybe it has like multiple examples included there. So just encourage you to kind of make the best use out of these upload opportunities here in the artist details section. There's specific information in the portal about file limits and types. So please follow along to those as best as possible. Next, you're going to get to the financial information section. This is an area that we've made a couple of changes to since last year. The first prompt you'll arrive at is asking you what you plan to use the funding for. We have these two main categories of working expenses and living expenses. You can check one of them if you know you're planning on just using one, or you could check both. Once you check one or the other or both, an additional pop down of options will appear. So let me show you what that looks like. So if you selected, working expenses, you're then going to get this list that really mirrors what we shared with you in that eligible expenses list. And we're asking you to kind of just check off which of these kind of categories of expenses you would use the funding for. We made this change to really kind of make you focus on like the types of expenses that this program is designed for. There is an option to select other and to provide an explanation of what you're planning to use the funding for. We just, again, ask that you go back to those guidelines and read that section about eligible expenses to make sure your spending plan aligns. One change we made from last year is kind of not having this narrative section. We were finding that artists were spending a lot of time telling us about these wonderful projects you all were planning on working on with the funding for this program. And I think folks may have gotten the false impression that that information would then impact the result of the application. So we went ahead and took that question out and really want you to just tell us, like, these are the things that we're planning to spend the money on. So again, you'll have a list for the working expenses that will drop down, as well as the living expenses. So just go through there and, check all that apply. And, if you have a question about an eligible expense, you can certainly reach out to us to ask. The next tab is attachments. So here's where we'll ask you to upload a completed, up-to-date W-9. There's a link to a template that you can download, and that's definitely a requirement that we ask you to have uploaded in order to be considered for funding and to submit your application. And then there are just kind of a couple double checking questions at the bottom of that page, which are, is this your correct address? Did you include your social security number? So a couple kind of fail-safe questions there. And then the end is just we ask for your signature. Here I'll just point that it's important to put your full name in this field. And then from there, you'll be able to submit your application. So that was a lot of information. I'll say too, on our website, we have an FAQ that we've compiled over a past couple of years of questions that we saw a lot. This session will also be posted, and then of course you can feel free to reach out. But at this time, I'll go ahead and pull up the chat and see if I can start working through some of your questions. Julia, I will get to your question in just a second. I'm going to try to work through some of the things that have popped up in the chat. You can feel free to keep your hand raised. Jermaine, okay, we don't have too many questions in here. Jermaine asked, are you allowed to be awarded multiple grants with MSAC? And the answer is yes. The one qualifier would be we ask you not to apply for funding for the same exact thing. It could be elements of a project, but not for the same thing, or use your funding for the same thing. But you certainly could apply for a creativity grant and a Grants for Artists grant. And then let's see, we have someone asking how many applicants will be selected. So each year that depends on the amount of money that we have allocated to the grant program. We don't know that exact amount this year. I think it'll be between 150 or so, somewhere in that ballpark. Someone asking about work sample submissions. If you're a multi-genre writer and you're sending proof of your artistic practice, can you submit links to published work in different genres? Yes, absolutely. The best way to do that might be if you are uploading a PDF with multiple links. That might be the best way to do that. Or yeah, that may be the best approach for sharing multiple links that kind of reflect the work that you're requesting funding to support. In terms of artists that have LLCs or businesses, you can definitely have those. We are unable to fund those directly. So you, as an independent artist, you're able to submit your social security number and W-9 and receive a grant that way while still having a LLC on the side. Sure, happy to explain a little bit more about the random selection aspect. So for this program, again, once we sort out any applications that are deemed ineligible, we take the rest of the applications, and it's not super fancy by any means, but the process actually does involve a couple of members of the Maryland State Arts Council staff, as well as an outside observer. We use a formula in an Excel sheet that randomizes the applications, and we then pick the top, start from the top, and as many as we're able to support with the funding that's allotted that year. So again, it's not we're not putting them in a bag, but pretty much using the same sort of logic of really randomizing that list there and then working from top to bottom. We have a question about someone who's a graduate from a bachelor's program or about to graduate from a bachelor's program, but will be unassociated with the institution by the due date. Is there a set amount of time of being unassociated with a degree program? I'd say, Sierra, if you're going to be graduated at the time of the application is due and you're submitting, then that's totally fine. I think as long as you're not actively in school when the grant program period starts. Kathy, is that something you wanted to chime in on?
Yeah, actually, in the guidelines, we have some specific language about this, and it is at the time of application.
Okay.
So if you're still enrolled at the time of application, then you're not eligible to apply. So I would say think about when you decide to apply. The application's open right now, but the deadline is not until January 17th. So something to consider there as far as technicalities of time.
Perfect. I'll just wait until like next week.
Yeah, that would be best if you just wait until you've graduated. There's no preference given to applications submitted earlier, so that won't affect your opportunity. Okay, let's check out some of these raised hands. Jalea Williams. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name.
Yeah, Jalila.
Jalila. Yes, I see the other L there. Apologies.
Oh, it's okay. It's okay. I just wanted to kind of ask a question specifically about the requirement that you have to rent or own property in order to be eligible for the grant, or do you just need to live in Maryland? Because in my specific case, I don't own and I don't rent. I live at home. So I just wanted to know, like, is that just canceled out? I just wanted to know the likelihood. That's all. Because I saw that as a requirement.
If you're able to enter like a address that you're living at the time of residency, I think Chad or Kathy, do you have any other insights there? I think as long as you're an active resident, if you're in a situation where you're not required to pay rent, I don't think that would be
no. Yeah, Jalila, you're fine. As long as you can enter an address on your W-9, which could then be used to, assuming you were selected, could be used to process payment, and that you could receive a check at that address.
Okay.
That would be okay.
Okay. Thank you so much for clarifying that, because when I saw that, I thought that it was just a wrap. I wasn't sure. So that's helpful. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Of course, and thank you, Chad. Check our chat here. We do have time for more questions.
There is one from Melanie Royster, Jess.
I missed. Okay.
I'm going to have to scroll up a little bit.
Was that the LLC question? Or
yeah, I'm sorry. Did you address that?
Yeah, I think I did.
Sorry.
Oh, it's okay. It's okay, Chad. Josephine, did you have a question?
I guess I'll just ask another question if that's okay. So with the unaffiliated, if I were contracting, like contracting, for example, with an LLC as a teacher, like as an instructor, then the funds would not be able to encourage or support that endeavor.
Correct. it would be able to support work outside of that relationship,
Okay,
if
gotcha.
that makes sense.
Okay. Yep.
If it is like a formal employment or full-time employment relationship, and Chad, help me if I'm wrong, but anything that you're creating outside of kind of a partnership with an institution or a business or a larger arts organization would be eligible, but that work itself, because you're being compensated through that employment relationship, would not be. Chad, does that answer the question, you think?
It does. Yeah, the spirit of this grant is around not bolstering people's regular wages as full-time employees. It is, on the other hand, available to artists who are working in the gig economy. Well, that's not the question, really. Who might have multiple contracts per year for limited term employment, working for different organizations. Teaching artists come to mind. Certain theater artists would be working for multiple different organizations under distinct contracts. This funding could be used to support that kind of relationship. But if an artist is a full-time employee of a single organization, they would not be eligible for GFA funding.
I really apologize. I think the mailman arrived right at this moment. I hope people can't hear too much background noise from my thoughts. Is it inaudible, Chad? Can you hear me? Okay, thank you, Emily. A couple more questions I think came in. Wow, they're really going crazy downstairs. Would it be the same process to apply as a sole proprietor using my SSN instead of my EIN? Yes, I think as long as you can submit your social security number and W-9, that's completely fine. We walked through a couple of these scenarios also in our frequently asked questions section on our website as well. Josephine, I think you're having some trouble with your microphone. I think if you can unmute yourself, you should be able to. Oh, okay, are you good?
Yes, I'm back now. Thanks
Okay,
so
great.
much. Yes, my question was as it relates to media arts, just because there's so many different like digital assets, whether it be like video or photography, what type would you like recommend to show sustained creative practice, just with there being so much multimedia?
I think I would go with what you feel best represents your work and how you plan to use the funding. Like if you are planning to, like what type of your practice will this funding sustain, even if it's not working expenses but living expenses, maybe even just within the cycle that's going to be happening through the end of June. What might you be planning to work on, or what type of your practice might you be planning to really build during that time period? Could be something that you highlighted, but again, in that artist details section, certainly encourage you to check all that applies. And if you take advantage of maybe uploading either a PDF with multiple examples, feel free to kind of showcase a range. I think that a range is totally helpful to see.
Okay, great. Thank you. Because it's helping me kind of think of like the frequency or like what type of content you'd like. So I'll put that into practice for like a website update or a PDF.
Yeah, that would be great. I think, maybe work that you were doing like 10 years ago might not be as relevant, but like kind of what you're really focused on and exploring right now, I think would be of most interest to us.
Oh, great. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Any other questions here? We have a question in the chat about resumes and information around kind of dates and years. I think it can be helpful. We're not requiring that folks have really outlined like years and dates for specific projects and work samples they're submitting, but it could certainly be helpful in helping us show kind of how your artistic practice has continued and sustained. In terms of what we mean by sustained, we're looking just to see that these funds are going to artists that are working and committed to developing work and earning income from work, not just, for example, like a very short period of time or the past month or something like that, that this is something that you're committed to and is a huge part of kind of your practice and your livelihood. We want to be able to kind of see that this isn't just a one-time thing for you. So that's kind of really what we're trying to avoid when we use the word sustain. We just want to see that this is a commitment. Chad, you might tell me if my answer is right to this one, but in terms of certificate programs, as long as they're not degree seeking programs, I believe it's totally fine if you're taking educational courses. Okay. Chad's saying yes. Brittany, we're not asking for, the question is, could you provide sales over years? You're welcome to include that information in your work samples, but we're not asking for you to demonstrate income. We really want to see evidence of your practice, and we are not asking you to get as granular with the amount of income that you're earning through your practice. Well, if the questions have kind of petered out here, I guess we'll go ahead and wrap up. Any last call for questions from the group that's still online today?
Hi, can anyone hear me?
Jermaine, we can hear you.
Okay, great. I do have another question. I was wondering if you have multiple social media accounts I'm a multidisciplinary artist. I practice photography and also spoken word. So I was wondering if it was possible to be able to share both Instagram accounts that I have as opposed to just one. And if there is a possibility, how would I submit it in the application?
Kathy, tell me if I'm wrong with this one, but I believe you can enter multiple links in that field that asks for websites or social media accounts. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe if you just put a comma or a semicolon to separate out your links within that field, that should be fine.
Okay, thank you.
If you maybe I'll jump in as well, Jess. So Jermaine, if both of your social media accounts document your art in some way, if they both do that, then there's no benefit in including both. One would be the same as two, because this is an eligibility-based application. And so the person who submits two social media accounts is not going to be looked at any differently during the review process as the person who submits one.
Okay, even better.
Right.
I guess
So,
another question too is if say for instance, because I asked a question about multiple grants being granted multiple funding from you all, would it be best to just make sure that whatever I submit in one application doesn't factor into what I submit in another? So like for instance, if I'm submitting for spoken word in this one, to kind of exclude that in other grant opportunities, or does that not even matter?
I think, Jermaine, if you're kind of filling out two applications around the same time, one nice thing about the grants for artists, of course, is that you have all these areas of living expenses and expenses that aren't covered in many of the other MSAC grant programs. So you could kind of submit what your plan is, and then we would just ask, if your plans change to still align with the eligible expenses. And when you go to kind of report, if you were awarded, you could go and report at the end on what you actually spent the money on. And if you have to pivot from some expenses that end up being covered by, say, a creativity grant, just make sure it still fits that eligibility criteria. And again, I guess that would only be a scenario you'd have to encounter if you or were awarded both. But the grants for artists offer such flexibility in how you can use the funds that it's most likely that you would have flexibility here rather in the project grant.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions today? Well, I'll move us along. Just want to say again, thank you all so much for coming. A link to our mailing list where you can sign up to make sure you know about all of the other grant opportunities, professional development, and panelist opportunities we mentioned at the beginning. And as you get working on your application, if you have additional questions, my contact information is on the website and listed in the guidelines. So I look forward to hearing from you all with other questions, and we can hang on here and answer a couple more if folks have any.
My only question was, are we going to get this recording emailed to us or sent to us?
It won't be emailed, but it will be up on our website, on our YouTube archive. Chad,
Okay, perfect.
We don't typically email these out specifically, correct?
Usually not, but the YouTube, our MSAC, I'll just get the handle right now and put it in the chat.
Okay.
Our handle on YouTube is at MD Arts Council. So, oh dear. Sorry, give me just a second. So you can find us there on YouTube, and then this recording will be up there in the next few days.
Well, thank you all so much. I really appreciate everyone's time and great attention and questions, and look forward to hearing from some of you offline in the next few weeks. And happy holidays to those that celebrate, and best of luck with your application. Thank you all.